Martin Popoff back again for another edition of Overkill Unearthed. This is the show where we look at a few albums from heavy metal history. They might have made some waves, might not have. They might have been well received, who knows. Before we get going, we'd like you to join our Patreon, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. What are we going to look at on this edition of Overkill Unearthed? It is the Prince of Darkness himself. This is, of course, No More Tears. It came out September 17th, 1991. Here's my copy of it, signed by Ozzy and Zach. There we go. Yeah, a little bit about Ozzy to start with before we get into the record. I mean, he kind of needs no introduction, so I'll try to be brief about this. Massive rock star through his years in Black Sabbath, the first 8 albums. He goes solo. He does great right out of the gates. I mean, he's kind of a mess. He's definitely drinking a lot. I mean, this is. He has these problems all along, but he kind of stumbles into this solo career. Sharon Osbourne, famously helps him get his feet on the ground. They're on Jet Records. They have a big record with the first record. The second record, Diary of a Madman, they go through some tragedy with Randy Rhoads getting killed, but they stay famous. They stay big. Jakey Lee comes in, Bark at the Moon. Ultimate Sin is doing well. Zach joins for No Rest for the Wicked, which brings us right up to now, right up to 1991. So the massive band. He's quote unquote a solo artist, but of course there's all these great players around him helping him have this big career, and he's just this heavy metal juggernaut all the way through the 80s. So a little bit about No More Tears. Let's put this in context a little bit. So his last record was 1988. He's considered to have had a little bit of a stumble with No Rest for the Wicked and Ultimate Sin. Ultimate Sin was not that well received. It had very dirty production values. There weren't really big hits coming off of No Rest for the Wicked. So he's in this frame in the 80s where hair metal has been massive from, say, 83 through to 91. Here he is in 1988. He starts stretching things out, and this happens with a lot of bands when they get older, but here we are, 1988. His next record isn't all the way till 1991. Now, lots is going on. He's always making the news for all his crazy stuff, and he's touring and all that kind of thing. But essentially what happens is hair metal is kind of running out of steam. In 1991, it's kind of interesting that this record comes out basically the same week that finally Guns N' Roses come back with the Use Your Illusion albums. But on the same day that the Guns N' Roses comes out, you get the Nirvana album, Nevermind, so their second record, and it just blows up, and all of a sudden grunge is all the rage. So you've got the likes of your Ozzy Osbournes, you've got Aerosmith, Motley Crue. There's this little thing that I like to call go to Vancouver and try harder, which happens with a lot of these bands. So there were a lot of these bands that went to Vancouver and worked with like Bruce Fairbairn and in Little Mountain and stuff. You've got Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Motley Crue. Everybody's trying to clean up and try to make these records that can compete with kind of the death of hair metal and moving into something else. Kiss has a good album with Revenge. So Ozzy doesn't go to Vancouver to make this record. It's made in California, but it really sounds like one of those records. It sounds like a go to Vancouver and try harder record. The production is almost overdone and corporate. It's really big production on this. You've got massive ballads on this record, but they're huge hits. So this actually works. This ploy, this trope. Heart is doing it, Cheap Trick is doing it, Aerosmith is doing it, Road to Nowhere, Time After Time, Mama I'm Coming Home, 3 massive ballads, all of them hits on this record. So one thing I definitely don't like is that it's kind of defined by these big ballads. Mama I'm Coming Home, very innovative song. You get that bass line. Now, Bob Daisley is the bassist on this record. Ozzy has this sort of, in and out relationship with Bob Daisley over and over. But this is a Mike Inez riff. He came up with this riff. So here he is kind of coming into the band. He's mentioned, he's in the videos. Bob Daisley has now been trounced out of the band. So this is a song that was probably maybe the second biggest hit off the record, but it's a heavy metal song and it's a very innovative song. As angry metalheads of the day, we loved everything heavy metal, and we loved Ozzy to be heavy metal. And actually, frankly, the No Rest for the Wicked album was a good return for, good, headbanging fans for Ozzy. I mean, it actually probably, technically speaking, it might be his heaviest album, or his most purely heavy metal album, and that's the first one where Zach comes in on. So on this record, gladly, happily, we do get some good heavy metal on here. You've got Mr. Tinker Train. You've got I Don't Want to Change the World with that great big chorus on it. You've got Zombie Stomp. So there are some really good heavy songs on here. And the production, as I say, it's a very corporate production, but it's also a very thick and strong and bassy production as well. And the guitars are really, super thick guitars on here. There's a little bit of keyboards from time to time, but essentially it's a massive guitar, bass, and drums album. The drums are recorded very wet. You've got Randy Castillo on here. One of the interesting things I've noticed in re-looking at this record that's kind of neat is that Randy Castillo, the drummer, who sadly is no longer with us, he died of cancer, but he's in on all the credits, which is kind of nice of Ozzy and Sharon to do. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, you get this big rhythmic album, and it's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if Ozzy and Sharon and Zach and these guys were all sort of cognizant of what was going on with the big grunge revolution. But I even remember when this record came out, people were saying it was moving with the times. It was a little bit grungy. It was slower and heavier and not so much party rock. Although there are definitely some partyish lyrics on here. But in terms of a sound, it almost feels like they are adjusting for this whole, more or less, I would say, Soundgarden and Alice in Chains reality rather than a Nirvana and Pearl Jam reality. So how did all this work out for Ozzy? How did throwing all these ballads on here work out? How did having these heavy metal hits work out? How did making a contemporary record work out? It worked out very well, thank you very much. This record went to #7 on Billboard. I mean, Ozzy, the debut album, Blizzard of Oz, is 5 times platinum. Things go down a little bit. I think the next one is 3 or 4 times platinum, but there is a situation where by the time you get to No Rest for the Wicked, Ozzy is down to 2 times platinum. Still, he's doing great. But this record actually went 4 times platinum. It's kind of a second wind, isn't it, for Ozzy? I mean, literally, he's doing twice as much business on No More Tears as he did on No Rest for the Wicked. So he's getting that big, huge second wind. And this reminds me a little bit about another Go to Vancouver and Try Harder band, AC/DC. They had the exact same thing happen at the exact same time. They had a couple records that weren't very well received, and Fly on the Wall and Blow Up Your Video, but they come back with the Razor's Edge, where they're just saying, okay, let's really dig into this and write some good songs. Let's make every song on this a potential hit. And that record blew up for them, and all of a sudden, they were doing great again. So the same thing happens with this Ozzy Osbourne record. I mean, again, a little bit of the negative. It does feel a little corporate. There are too many ballads. There's just a little bit too many moves where he's kind of playing to as large a crowd as possible on here. So it does remind me of that little bit of a thing where Aerosmith came back and, Pump was great, but Get a Grip, and it gets a little corporate. Same thing kind of happens with this Ozzy record. So that's pretty much all I have to say on No More Tears. Why don't I wrap this up with a grade for you? So, we always do the skull rating here. So let's go with, I'm going to go with 3 skulls out of 5 skulls for No More Tears. I think it has quite a few flaws. It really is of its time, and it really is a little bit corporate sounding. So there you go, Martin Popoff signing off for Overkill Unearthed. We've been discussing Ozzy Osbourne, No More Tears. Tell us what you think in the comments below. Let's have a debate about this record. We shall see you again next time, and don't forget to subscribe.